This is an MJA Inc. Investigations warning. This MJA podcast is rated E for explicit. Some details of a case and language used on this podcast might be upsetting to some of our listeners. Listeners' discretion is advised. And for those who are still with us, kick back and enjoy the show. No greater honor will ever be bestowed upon an investigator than when they are entrusted with an investigation into the death of a human being. MJA Inc. Investigations believes in these words. You can read past publications that MJA considers it an honor for us to work on the cases that we do. Welcome, folks, to our MJ podcast, Deep into the Woods. The series, Just Stay Word or Two, Part 3, Case Profiles. These are true cases. My name is Mark, and I am your host for tonight's show. We are coming to you from our home office in Plattsburgh, New York, located in the Adirondack Mountains. The names have been changed to initials to respect the privacy of the people involved or who gave testimony in grand juries or in court, unless a family spokesperson contacts us to do a podcast on the case. Some of the cases we will talk about have nearly no traces in the media. Case 1, Welcome to Indiana. The mysterious death of Rick Olson. Accidental or murder? It was a hot July summer day in 1970 the police were called to West Havens Drive in Kokomo, Indiana for an accidental shooting. When police arrived, they found 15-year-old Rick Olson dead on the dining room tile floor from a gunshot. The witnesses sitting at the dinner table was Rick's mother and 10-year-old brother. Olson's stepfather, Edward Big Ed Phillips from California, joined the Olson family in 1968. Big Ed was an ex-member of the Hells Angels. Big Ed found an exciting and charming way to become our garage band's manager, called the Crypt of Evil, by using drugs, booze, and ladies. Big Ed claims while cleaning his guns at the dinner table, having dinner with his family, one of the guns discharged, striking and killing Rick. Who in their right mind cleans guns at the dinner table while having dinner with your family? Just think about that, folks. Our old Little League coach, who was a police detective, saw Joe and I walking down an alley, which he pulled up to us and told us to get in the car. Our old Little League coach took us to the police station and laid down the photos down on the table of Rick laying dead on the dining room floor. Then he asked Joe and I if we knew anything about this, which we did. When Big Ed came into the picture, he was very abusive to Rick. Joe, Lenny, and myself witnessed the abuse inflicted on Rick by Big Ed and heard the threats that he could kill Rick and make it look like an accident. A grand jury or death inquest was held to hear the circumstances of the events that led to Rick Olson's death. Joe, Lenny, and myself were three of Rick's closest friends who were young teenagers at the time and who was first questioned by the police for hours. And then we had to testify at the hearing for hours. The story we told was unthinkable, but Rick Olson's death was ruled accidental. The three of us carry the most guilt because we didn't know what to do. We had never heard of child abuse at the time. Chuck Olson, we have been trying to track you down for years through social media and public records, and we have found nothing. My name is Mark Harper, who lived on Columbus Boulevard. Rick and I played Little League together, and we had a garage band and practiced a lot at your house. I am a volunteer investigator for MJA Inc. Investigations. I would like to talk to you about what happened to Rick and the new evidence we have found. Chuck, please contact us at 518-310-1479 or email us at mja_inc@hotmail.com. Case 2. Welcome to Indiana. It was in 1976 in South Central Indiana. SF and her 5-year-old son, CF, was kidnapped from their home by two men, RM and CL, and a female, KL. SF's husband owned a waste management company, and it was rumored that RM had ties to the Chicago syndicate. Because the true ransom was You sign over your business legally, or you never see your family again. The kidnapped victims were taken to KL's secluded apartment. The mother and son was put in 2 different closets. They were allowed to write notes to each other for around 3 days. If RM was hired to kidnap them, he went off script when he found the company and personal account bank books in SF's purse. KL looked a lot like SF, and while wearing sunglasses and going to the bank drive-through window. So RM decided to have KL pose as SF and slowly started draining out the accounts $9,000 at a time. They started before SF and her son had been reported missing. Then 3 days later, RM decided they couldn't have any witnesses because everything was working out, getting the money. They took the kidnapped mother and son to Northwest Indiana County and shot them and buried them. CL, who had kids, was left-handed, so RM shot the 5-year-old boy left-handed. Then one day when KL went to draw out more money, the police had been caught on and they followed her home. When police raided the apartment, all 3 of the kidnappers were there. When police was searching the apartment, they found the handwritten notes from the victims to each other. The last note the 5-year-old boy wrote to his mom said, "Mommy, I will see you in heaven." The 5-year-old boy knew he was going to die. Now just think of that, people, the gravity of the situation. That's just unthinkable that a 5-year-old knew what was going to happen. Seasoned investigators who worked on the case, who I happen to know them, just can't talk about the case or they get very emotional. CL, who is the one who led police to the bodies. They were buried in an average grave much bigger than a shallow grave. CL and KL both testified against RM, who was the mastermind of the kidnapping and had maps and diagrams, that he had shot the victims and did shoot the boy left-handed so CL would get the blame if they got caught. RM got sentenced to death, CL was sentenced to 30 years, and KL was sentenced to 20 years. Karma is a bitch. RM dies a slow death from cancer in prison, and the night before KL's release, she died in her cell from blunt force trauma. CL was the only one that survived, and many people wondered why he survived. The others got what was coming to them for kidnapping a mother and her 5-year-old son and then killing them. Case 3. Welcome to Indiana. It was 1977 in central Indiana is when CM and a friend of hers went to a steakhouse and dance club, and their husbands were going to join them after work. It seemed it became a habit that there was a man always outside the door, and when ladies were coming in, he would offer them a box of chocolates. The guy had been ran off because he wasn't a paying customer. Then he started going in the dance club drinking, so he was a paying customer, and he was still trying to give ladies boxes of chocolate. People thought he was a creep, and some said he was just harmless. The guy approached CM and her friend's table, and they were in the middle of an argument. So when the guy offered CM candy, she went off on him, telling him how pathetic he was and that he couldn't get a date with a female. The guy is embarrassed and runs out of the dance club. CM and her friend was still having the argument, so CM got up and left. As soon as she walked out the door, the candy man stabs CM in the heart with a steak knife from the steakhouse. The guy puts her body in the back of his car, which he had taken out the back seat. So her body was very low and covered with a blanket. The guy drove around country roads for 3 days with her dead body in the back. When he wanted to have sex, he would stop and have sex with CM's dead body. He did that for 3 days and then dumped her body. CM's dead body was found by hunters about 3 days later. It was learned that the candy guy was named JG, and he became the main suspect and was arrested. When they searched his car with no back seat in it, evidence was found that placed CM in his vehicle, including blood which matched her blood type. Now, just think, the back seat was taken out, which means JG had premeditated intent of abducting some female. During the trial, JG's defense was when he was born, the doctor dropped him on his head and caused some brain damage. Then when he drinks and gets mad at somebody like he did with CM, he blacks out and doesn't remember what he does for hours. JG did have medical records that he was dropped at birth. But when JG killed CM, he was 45 years old and hadn't killed anybody else before. So the dropping baby syndrome defense didn't work, and JG was given 65 years. JG died in prison. May he rot in hell. Case 4. Welcome to Indiana. It was 1981 in lower central Indiana when a man was on his son's moped, smoking a joint, going through a patch of woods which led to a farm tractor road. When the man discovered what looked like to be a female's dead body, her whole face had been caved in. What was odd about the female's body, it had sticks sticking out of every hole of her body. The man's natural reaction and shock made him pull a few sticks out of her body before he realized he was destroying evidence. It's just not natural to see a dead body like that, and the man had to be in shock. The man went home and called 911. But back then, 911 couldn't trace where the call came from. About 2 days later, the man had the police knocking on his door. He let them in, and they asked the man if he placed the 911 call. The man replied, "Why do you ask that?" That's when they told the man that it was him who called or the guy across the street, because they were the only ones home during the day because everyone else worked days and those two worked afternoons. So the man said yes. He placed the call after he discovered the body. The man went to the police station for questioning. At the police station, they asked the man if he knew A.L., who was the female victim. The man answered yes, but looking at the body, he couldn't tell it was A.L. She was so badly beaten. The man knew A.L. through her sister, who he had went to high school with. After the facts was laid out how the man discovered the female's body, the police asked him if he knew B.A., which they then asked the man what he could tell them about B.A. The man told him that he used to give R.H. a ride to the factory where they worked. They got off at midnight, and the man drove R.H. home and was invited in. When they got into R.H.'s house, there was B.A. sitting on a kitchen chair facing the bathroom door. Locked in the bathroom was R.H.'s wife and two kids. His wife is yelling for help. R.H. picks up a baseball bat, knocks B.A. off the chair, and has the man push him with his foot on B.A.'s ass, making him slide across the floor. Two more hits with the baseball bat, and B.A. was out, running out of the house. B.A. tried to rape R.H.'s wife and had ripped her clothes off right in front of her children. B.A. was later charged with assault, sexual assault, and child endangerment. His mother bailed him out of jail, and while waiting for a trial, during that time is when B.A. picked up the female A.L. and they went to a drive-through window food joint. Then B.A. drives to the old tractor road, which it was dark at this point. They ate their food, and after is when B.A. attacked A.L., which started by beating her in the truck and raping her before dragging her out of the truck to kill her. B.A. and A.L. just happened to be seen by R.M. at the food joint and what direction they were headed when they left the drive-through window, which was in the direction of the murder scene. A.L.'s blood type was found in B.A.'s truck from where he had beat her. B.A. was convicted of rape and murder and given the death sentence, which was later reduced to life without parole. Let's take a pause for the cause, and we will be back in a moment.
Traveling north to find you. Train was beating the wind in my eyes. Don't even know what I'll say when I find you. Call out your name, love, don't be surprised. It's so many months and so long since I've met you. Don't even know what I'll find when I get to you. But suddenly now I know where I belong. It's many hundred miles and it won't be long. It won't be long. It won't be long. It won't be long.
Welcome back to our MJ podcast, the series, Just a Word or Two, Part 3, Case 5. Welcome to Indiana. It was in south central Indiana in December 1981 is when D.N. disappeared. D.N.'s truck was found on fire out in the country close to a mobile home park. K.O. was a paid government CI and he was assigned to the case. The main factors were K.O. knew the victim and knew all the players involved, growing up with some of them. Early on in the investigation, 2 witnesses came forward remembering seeing a truck parked on the side of the road, stating it had been dark for about 2 hours when they had seen the truck. The back end of the truck was filled with scrap metal, which is what D.N. would do to make extra money. What struck out to them, there was an old hot water heater leaning against the tailgate of the truck. The truck's description they gave fits D.N.'s truck. The witnesses seen no one in the truck or outside of the truck and saw no one while they were going to the mobile home park. Later that evening, D.N.'s truck was moved a half a mile to a T intersection and set on fire. Let it be known that all the scrap metal was missing. D.N.'s remains were found on Thanksgiving Day in 1982 by 2 hunters discovered in another county 19 miles away, which D.N.'s father-in-law lived in. At the time of D.N.'s death, they were in a court battle for custody of D.N.'s and his father-in-law's daughter's 2 children. K.O.'s investigation believes that D.N.'s body was dumped near his father-in-law and grandfather to the children on purpose to set up the grandfather. The grandfather was a smart man. There was no question that D.N. and the grandfather's daughter was going to lose custody of the 2 children. So why would the father-in-law and grandfather of the children have to gain by killing D.N.? Also, why would the father-in-law and grandfather take the scrap metal? After D.N.'s death, someone broke into his house by breaking a basement window and stealing D.N.'s tools. There are a lot of suspects to choose from, but with the scrap metal being gone and the tools being taken, narrows down the suspects in D.N.'s circle of friends. At this time, the case is still unsolved. Case 6. Welcome to Florida. This case is still classified because of the Mexican drug cartel connections. It was early in 1982 when paid informant K.O. was contacted by a retired FBI agent in Miami, Florida. He didn't give any info, he just flew K.O. down to Miami. An Orange Grove King's 5-year-old daughter had been kidnapped and the ransom was $5 million. The FBI had been working on the case for 3 days and had produced nothing. During that time, there was no more calls from the kidnapper. So, K.O.'s ex-FBI friend told the Orange Grove King about K.O.'s pedigree. They had a meeting, and it was agreed that K.O. would be working on the case for a $50,000 reward and expenses. It was also agreed not to tell the FBI nothing. K.O. had one slim lead. The 5-year-old girl that was kidnapped needed to take 5 milligrams of phenobarbital every day. K.O. knew right away that the FBI was staking out drugstores, which they should have known the kidnapper wasn't going to get her medication that way. So, K.O. staked out drug houses that sold phenobarbital because back then it was used as a street drug. Since there was no more contact with the kidnapper, it was a waiting game. K.O. for 3 weeks kept taking photo after photo of the drug houses and the people coming and going. One night, while K.O. was looking at the photos, K.O. noticed a guy who just didn't fit the druggie profile, and he wasn't the landlord. He would come around about once a week. So, K.O. started following him after he left the drug house one day. The guy stopped at a grocery store and a liquor store. K.O. followed him in both stores. At the grocery store, he bought children's cereal and other kids' snacks. At the liquor store, he bought 3 bottles of wine sealed with a cork and red wax. After leaving the liquor store, K.O. followed him to a house where he brought in the groceries and wine. K.O. stakes out the house, and the next day, another guy comes out of the house using the same vehicle. K.O. follows him to the liquor store where he bought the same 3 bottles of wine and went back to the house. K.O. noticed the lights would go out around 2 a.m. about every night. The next day, K.O. pretended to be a gas meter reader, which was in back of the house. K.O. found a bedroom. While looking in, there were children's toys and a potty chair, but he couldn't see the bed or see a child. K.O. had never seen a child leave the house. After the same patterns for 2 more days of the 2 suspects is when K.O. done night recon, looking into every window, so he would have a pretty good look at the way the house was laid out. K.O. also noticed some of the kids' toys have been moved. K.O. went to the drug house, showed a photo to the drug dealer, and asked him what kind of drugs did the guy buy. Well, the drug dealer said 5 milligrams of phenobarbital. K.O. paid $100 for that info. Now K.O. had it in his head that he had the right people in the right house. K.O. had a ex-medical examiner mix him up some knockout drugs. The next day, K.O. went to the liquor store and gave the cashier $200 if he would take that type of bottles of wine down to where there was only 3 left. K.O. went on to say if he let him run the store for about 45 minutes, K.O. would give him $500, which he did. As soon as the cashier left, K.O. used a long needle to go through the wax and cork and made sure each bottle got the same dose. Then K.O. covered the hole in wax with red wax. About 20 minutes later, one of the suspects came in and grabbed the 3 bottles of wine, and K.O. cashed him out. The real cashier came back about 20 minutes later. K.O. set up a stakeout of the house with a few photos, knowing the suspect would be going back to the house, which he did. K.O. noticed the lights were still on at 3 a.m., so he waited until 3:30 a.m. and the lights were still on. K.O. made his move on the house. He went to the bedroom where the toys were, and K.O. had to shimmy the window lock to get in. Once inside, K.O. shined his flashlight to the other side of the room where the bed should be. There, on the far corner of the bed, a little girl holding a stuffed animal. I told her I was there to help her and asked her who her father was. She smiled and she said, "The Orange Grove King." K.O. had the right girl. K.O. told her to get back in bed like she was asleep, and he had to check on the two kidnappers, and he would be back to get her. That's when the 5-year-old girl spoke up and said no, there was 3 men. The bedroom door was locked from the outside, so K.O. went out the bedroom window and went to the patio door. K.O. could see through the curtains to notice 2 of the suspects were knocked out. K.O. shimmied the patio door, drew his gun, and went in. All 3 men were passed out. So, K.O. handcuffed them and tied them up with a phone cord all together. As K.O. was walking away, he said, "Hell no." K.O. turned around and started beating and kicking all 3 of the kidnappers. They never woke up, but when they did, they felt the pain. K.O. called the FBI and told them where to find their kidnappers. K.O. was told by the FBI to stay there, and K.O. said no, he was taking the girl home, for she had been gone for almost 6 weeks. K.O. told the FBI they could deal with him later. K.O. took the girl home to her parents, which they took her to the hospital for a checkup, and they collected the child's clothing for trace evidence. The FBI caught up with K.O. and went off because K.O. beat up the suspects and they were in the hospital. K.O. said, listen, he wasn't working for the FBI, and he would take the full blame of the beating in court, showing it didn't happen while they were in FBI custody. In court, K.O. admits to the beating of the kidnappers and said he just snapped, and K.O. was working for a private individual and that he wasn't working for the FBI. K.O. states, as it turns out, these 3 guys were professional kidnappers. K.O. faced no charges where he was outnumbered and he had a child to think about, so K.O. used force that made sure K.O. and the 5-year-old girl would get out safely. The kidnappers would rent a house, kidnap a child, and hold them for weeks, and then they would know they were in the clear on the kidnapping. They had at least 3 successful kidnappings in the United Kingdom. Then it was learned that a lot of the ransom money was being invested in the Mexican drug cartels. All 3 of the kidnappers got life with no parole. After the Orange Grove King heard what K.O. did to the suspects, he paid K.O. $15,000 more. Still, as I speak, K.O. receives greeting cards from the once 5-year-old girl he saved. She has lived a very good life, and at a certain age, she stopped calling herself a victim and said she was a survivor. This was all handled privately, and the media never did find out about the kidnapping until the suspects appeared in court and was convicted. Case 7. It was in mid-1982 in Midwest Indiana town. KO was notified by an FBI source had just arrested the mayor, the chief of police, 7 police officers for taking kickbacks from the 14 whorehouses in town where they had been there since World War II. The whorehouses were hardly ever raided because the owner of the houses paid her taxes, her girls were clean and had medical checkups, and she gave gifts to the town. What brought this about was the owner since World War II turned over the business to her top madam. A syndicate out of Hammond and Chicago seen the profits being made and tried to get a cut of the pie. The madam turned them down. That's when the threats started happening to where the madam went to the police for help. Oh, the police agreed to help, but they wanted 10% of the profits, which they split up by police officers and politicians. The madam agreed, and this lasted a year, and she was losing money because the working girls had to give freebies to the police and to the politicians. The madam went to the FBI and the Justice Department and told them the story, and she had ledgers, sign-in books, and what rooms were used and by who. The FBI wired up all the whorehouses and for 6 months gathered evidence, and then the bust came down. Well, KO was called in to an Indiana State Police post and was told because of his work with them, he was going to relocate the witness, the madam. KO was given $10,000 and was told to get lost until court, and he didn't even want to know where KO will be taking her. If KO needed more cash, do it by a state line. When KO gets the money, start crossing state lines. KO and the madam had been on the road for about a year. When KO called in, there was a new development in the case. One of the police officers that had been charged beat up one of the working girls in a nightclub in front of everyone, thinking she knew where the madam was hiding. After that, the prosecutor went to the judge to have all the defendants' bail revoked because they were a danger to our citizens. The judge granted the wish, and then all the defendants filed for a fast and speedy trial. KO and the madam arrived in town right before the first trial started, and they left town until the next court hearing. The trials went on for about a year, and all of them were convicted and sentenced to long prison terms. Once again, KO relocated the madam under the Witness Protection Plan. The madam picked the location where she wanted to start her new life because she had her own money, and the Witness Protection Program went along with it. It's no surprise that KO and the madam still have contact with each other, and they've had 2 visits through the years. The madam is protected until all the convicted ones are dead and gone. Some of the convicts have been released. There is only one whorehouse left standing, and the others were sold, one caught on fire, and the rest were torn down. Case 8. Welcome to Indiana. On Friday, May 23, 19 1980, the school day ended just like any other. 29-year-old school teacher J.S. said goodbye to her students and talked with other staff members about their plans for the Memorial Day weekend. J.S. told them that she planned to spend the weekend with her family, and they were having their annual Memorial Day cookout as well as her nephew's birthday party. Then J.S. drove home to her rural one-bedroom ground floor apartment in Center Meadows Apartments, where she had lived for about 2 years. J.S. was an extremely dedicated teacher who taught special needs students in middle school. Her friends said despite her being a social butterfly, she would often cancel her plans to spend free time coming up with fun new lesson plans for her students that she lovingly called her kids. When Saturday came and J.S. didn't call or show up to her family's cookout, they grew concerned. When Sunday came and J.S. didn't show up for her nephew's birthday party, an event she would never miss, her mom knew something was seriously wrong. She began calling J.S.'s friends, neighbors, and staff from school, but no one had seen her. J.S.'s family went to her apartment and found J.S. dead. J.S.'s friend, who was with the family, stepped around the couch to find a bloody handprint about shoulder level on the wall outside of J.S.'s bedroom. He then turned and saw J.S.'s nude, blood-soaked body laying on the bathroom floor. The police were called. Investigators arrived to find J.S. dead on the bathroom floor. It was noted that it appeared as though J.S.'s killer had positioned her body. J.S. was laying face down rather than having her face turned to one side. Her arms were extended straight down her sides, and her palms were faced up and were clean. J.S.'s body was riddled with stab wounds, more than a dozen in total. She had been stabbed multiple times in the back, neck, torso, and head, and she had several slashes across her thighs and buttocks and her back. A 4-inch paring knife from J.S.'s kitchen that was found next to her body was determined to be the murder weapon. However, it had been wiped clean. A struggle took place starting in J.S.'s bedroom, and it was determined that the fatal wound had been inflicted first. J.S. stumbled into the bathroom and died around 3 minutes later. The other numerous stab and slice wounds had been inflicted after her death. This person took pleasure in watching J.S. die for 3 minutes. Aside from the bloody print found by J.S.'s friends, investigators also discovered a smeared partial print just outside of the kitchen. The first handprint was determined to be J.S.'s. The second was too smeared for a comparison. All of the blood found at the scene was determined to belong to J.S. J.S.'s apartment showed no signs of forced entry, and it had not been ransacked, and nothing was missing. One suspect did come to light during the investigation, but was never publicly named. A female friend of J.S. became a person of interest during the investigation. No evidence linking her to J.S.'s murder was ever found, and police call it mere speculation that she was involved in JS's death. The speculation comes in because the smeared print was small and JS wasn't sexually assaulted. The victim was nude, but no sexual assault could point to a woman. Plus, it didn't look good that the female person of interest was involved in another murder investigation. I have a quote for you all. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. Today is a gift of God, which is why we call it the present. Bill King. Always remember, folks, if you ever get bored with nothing to do, well, take a walk deep into the woods. You might be surprised at what you might find. I want to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in, for y'all have been so kind. You can catch our podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Unsolved Mysteries Not Related to the Show, and on our MJ website. That's the end of our MJ podcast. Just a word or two, Part 3, Case Profiles. These are true cases. My name is Mark. I was your host for tonight's show, and I say to you all, good night from Plattsburgh, New York.
You're dead.